any advice for an 18-year-old that pays their parents? I pay my mom about $20K a year, which is $16.67 per month for rent. So it's hard to save for college.
Man, how noble.
Man.
Bo, you were, I want to give you a compliment and set the table for you.
Okay.
Bo, when he started working for me, 20 years of age, by the way, made it through college, 20 years of age, was literally making money, more money, I think, in college than it was when I offered him, because he had so many scholarships.
To get my first job.
Because Tyler, obviously, tough situation. If you're having to pay your mom rent, I mean, I think this is so noble that you it sounds like you got a rough situation, but yet somehow you are this unique individual that's able to go out and make money already at such a young age. That the reason I make the correlation of Bo is that it just sets you up, that you obviously are a dynamic person that seems like you have a lot of things going for you. And I think it's great that you're also using that talent and that blessing to try to help your mother out who might be struggling with stuff. Bo, since you resemble a lot of this because you came from a tough, humble beginning, but then you always seemed like you just were able to make things happen. What would you share with Tyler?
Yeah, it's interesting because here's what I don't know. I don't know the familial dynamic here, and I want to be sensitive to that. So I'm going to speak sort of just in absolute terms, kind of removing the family relationship out of the equation. Because one, I think it's remarkable that you are 18 years old and you make enough money to be able to pay $20,000 a year in rent. Like that in and of itself is pretty impressive. But you've also said, hey, because I'm paying this rent, it's going to be really hard for me to be able to pay for college, because it sounds like the burden of that is going to fall on your shoulders as well. So what are some things I can do? Now, again, this is where I want to be sensitive to the familial relationship, and I want to kind of like, I don't know the unique circumstances there, but when I hear about an 18-year-old paying $1,667 of rent every month, where my mind immediately went was, man, that's pretty expensive rent. Like that's a pretty expensive number. And so one of the things that I would try to think through,
you could negotiate with mom.
Well, so one might be negotiate with mom. Hey, is there some way to like negotiate on this rental amount? Or two, if you are, let's assume that you're 18 and independent and sort of on your own or whatever, there might be other circumstances where you could provide shelter and housing for yourself that would be less expensive than $1,600. You might be able to go rent an apartment for $1,000 a month, or you could go rent somewhere and have a roommate and split cost or something like that. Again, I don't know the familial circumstance, but when I see that so much of your money is going to rent without knowing your income, I immediately think, okay, does this $20,000 you're paying in rent represent more than 25% of your gross income? Because that's generally our rule on housing. You don't want housing to cost you more than 25%. If that's the case, is there a way that I can get my housing costs down? So now let's pause there. Let's assume the answer is no. I can't do any of that stuff. I got to pay mom. I got to stay in the house. I got to do all this. Well, then what do I do for college? It sounds like if you don't have any money to save for college and you still have a desire to go to college, odds are you're probably going to have to borrow money to go to college. So I would think about what are the least expensive ways that I can get my secondary education? Instead of going to like the large state public school, are there ways I could begin taking classes right now at the local community college, begin knocking out some of my core classes?
Dual enrollment.
Doing dual enrollment. Are there solutions in place now that I could begin to satisfy my higher education requirement at a lower price point? And then if it does get to the point that ultimately I have to take out loans, I want to keep my footprint absolutely as small as possible. And I don't want all of the student loan debt that I accumulate between now and the time that I leave college to be more than what I anticipate my first year salary being. So if I think I'm going to go get a degree in a vocation that's going to allow me to make $50,000 a year, I want to make sure that my total student loan debt does not exceed $50,000 for whatever I have to take out. So if you only have to accumulate $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 of debt, and that's something you have to do in order to be able to graduate, you're going to find that once you get into the working world, that's going to be much better than graduating, saying, oh, I had this blank check, I have $80,000 of college debt, and now I got to go pay on that for the next 10, 15, 20 years. That's a hard one. What did I say there that you like, and what did I say that you didn't like?
I wanted to add just a few life tips here, because I mean, sometimes I'm just assuming based upon paying rent to when you're that young that this is a humble beginning situation. And I remember humble beginning for me was I didn't understand how scholarships worked. I didn't know how, and I always look back and I go, man, I took the SAT like once, and I was really good at math, and you would wonder if I was even literate, like you probably do watching the show on the other side. So I'm lucky I got into the University of Georgia. Fortunately, it was a lot easier to get into back then. But what I've now having resources, I realize how powerful it is for young people to go take an ACT or an SAT prep. Do you realize how colleges give so much weight on scholarship and scholarship money based upon those test scores? So don't sleep on the fact that, you need to probably go take a prep course so you can because if you pair a great test score with your humble beginnings and this life story, you probably go qualify for a lot of scholarships, and that would be a huge head start on not even having student loan. And then the other thing I was immediately thinking about is we hear this thing all the time talk about failure to launch, where kids just never go out on their own, and this is the opposite of this situation. Is that I'm worried about failure to well, I mean, I'm
be
trying
able to launch.
Well, because I'm just if your mom is counting on you to provide this much money every year, now maybe you're going to be, if you're a professional athlete and you can go buy mom a house and do the things that that you typically see on the news headlines about. That's great. But if you're just going a traditional path that you're going to become a professional in something and you have to build, we need to start creating a process to where your mom's not counting on that rent. So that's healthy for you as well as for her, to figure out where that transition point is, because you have the opposite of a failure to launch standpoint, is because if you're having to never be able to launch yourself because of having to cover family expenses, that can be an unhealthy relationship as well.